Allowing me to address such a distinguished audience, and especially Professor Sol for his kind help with, for the first time coming to Los Angeles.
Everyone's coming back.
Yes, yes. Always in the scene of the crime, they return. Well, let me just say a few words off text on the things that we have heard both before and in this panel. I was particularly struck by David Walker's equation, the truth plus leadership plus transparency equals transformation. And my talk will say a few things about leadership and transparency, albeit in a very sort of technical and in the detail kind of way, not in the big picture. But I wanted to say a few things about truth and how important it is for the Greek public discourse, that we're missing truth, as in truth as distinguished from correctness, so looking at it in a much wider sense. For example, we heard that we're not asking for nominal haircuts. This was not the case before the elections. This is the case now. And this unfruitful debate about the differences between first and second program, or whether the mix should be different, and then between the second and third, about whether we need a haircut. For accountants, reprofiling and a nominal haircut, perhaps it's equivalent, it's the same. But from a philosophical point of view, and from a political point of view, it makes a huge difference. There's an abyss between the two options. Because in the public's eye, a haircut means that somebody else will pay for our debt, notably Schäuble or whoever else is in the public's image. But reprofiling means that every euro will be paid by Greeks. And then it becomes a question of fairness and justice, this euro, how it's split between one class and the other, between one generation and the other, and between the living and the unborn yet to come. And it's a totally different question than the question we've been trying to address in the public discourse of Greece. And this is part of the problems that we're facing, the fact that we're not really discussing about those issues with the public and try to educate the public, not just on the accounting side, which is what we've been discussing, but on those matters as well. For example, as well, we saw a chart about the primary surpluses, and the government is trying to show that there is a huge difference, but then it's double counting. It's double counting the surpluses between one year and the other, because the surpluses are already cumulative. So you shouldn't do accumulation of a cumulative number. So again, these are all little problems of how we're actually misinterpreting and misusing the numbers and actually pushing our public in the wrong direction instead of the direction of truth, but in the direction of manipulation, effectively, of reality. Anyway, I'll go back to my presentation and talk about financial transparency in the public sector, which allows for improvements in accountability and government performance. And it also enhances public participation in public resource management, especially in times of crisis and of fiscal austerity. This is very important because it improves the planning of scarce resources, it contributes to limit unnecessary spending, and of course reduces corruption. PFM includes three main pillars: fiscal management, tax administration, and public procurement. In 2009, the way we managed our public finances was our biggest problem, with a primary balance deficit of more than 10% of GDP, as it was finally restated. Public consumption was increasing by about 2% per year, and investment also came mainly from the public sector. This was clearly unsustainable, and while the crisis in the rest of Europe was mainly as a result of imbalances in the banking sector, our crisis stemmed from PFM. However, partly because of the crisis and the adjustment programs we engaged, due to the country's international commitments, effectively the pressure from outside, we managed to put public finances back on track. Between 2009 and 2014, Greece was a champion in fiscal adjustment among EU countries, 12% of GDP, resulting finally in a primary surplus of 0.4 in 2014, and again in 2015, a bigger primary surplus. Ireland, the second best country, has undergone a less than 10% of its GDP fiscal adjustment. Transparency, I submit, was a main element of this reform. It's important that since 2011, Greece also participates in OGP, the Open Government Partnership, showing that it has, at least in name, some commitment to increase transparency, accountability, and citizen engagement to a new public administration model. Is it enough? Not by any stretch of imagination. However, despite failures and disappointments, and we still have a fair share of those, we have managed to implement several reforms that helped Greece put an end to decades of bad PFM, starting with state budget from 2011. And I remember the first discussions between IMF and the kind of budget that we had in 2010, the kind of lines that we used to have, et cetera, really put us on par with outside the OECD countries. So effectively, a lot of changes have happened since. Greece drafts its budget following a modified cash accounting system, which is a step forward. It's not the IPSAS that we should be moving towards, but this is a project that is not to be taken lightly or underestimated, but it's a project that's worthwhile, as we have effectively proven all the discussions all these 2 days. There are 4 stages in state budget: drafting, voting, execution, audit, and control. In each stage, a number of entities are involved. To cut a long story short, the state budget, the core of the state, effectively is controlled very well. The problems become with the local authorities and the other entities which are further away, and are still, I think that we're still some way from completing this job, and this is what we should be moving. I welcome Mr. Koutentakis' list of reforms that are coming forward. They're certainly a step in the right direction. In addition, we created a budget office for the Parliament. Despite initial hiccups, now it's been functioning very well, and it has really an independent voice, independent from the government, and it's a welcome addition to the arsenal of institutions that can help with PFM. All relevant documents of the budget are available in the Ministry of Finance's website. Time series data on an open format on a monthly basis, both for central and general government entities. This is, I think, very welcome, and it's much better than what we had before we entered the crisis. Also, we have the AVIA, the Greek word for transparency, and despite some exceptions that the previous government and this government in particular has made to it, really it's a tool that forces all entities to publish on the website all the expenses effectively that they're doing and all the decisions that have any economic material effect. As a result, a lot more is in the hands of journalists and of the public discourse. So this has made a huge difference, and I hope that this is one of the reforms that will stick with us. This is a reform that the first government of George Papandreou back in 2010 did, and it's, I think, the most successful reform from that time. The latest law provides for a fiscal council as well, an independent authority that will enhance audit and control. This is not yet operational. Effectively, the Greek governments are playing the very successful Italian football system of catenaccio, basically waiting, and not accepting any own goals, and then right at the last minute you win by 1-0. Basically, that's the strategy that we've been following. It's worked with us with the euro back then, but I'm not sure if it's going to work now with the programs. Again, many things need to be done, especially regarding budgets on local governments and SOEs and pension funds. this is going to be an interesting time in the next few years as we try to fix all those discrepancies and problems. Now, serious progress has been made as regards to the transparency of the tax administration. I mean, I have to give a disclaimer here. I was the head of the Tax and Customs Administration back in 2013 and the first half of 2014, so I have to say good things about the tax administration. So the GSPR, the General Secretariat, publishes reports on targets, a 4-year strategic plan, a 2-year operational plan, and this is all very important to ensure that the public follows what's been happening with the Secretary General of Public Revenue. Data on targets and performance are on 2 sites, publicrevenue.gr and gsas.gr, and this is not comprehensive, and unfortunately, like other systems of transparency, like the pensions, the data has stopped being published. Currently, they have 2014 data. Unfortunately, in a country of weak institutions, people matter disproportionately, and this obviously has not been seen as an important aspect. And I hope that the new Secretary General will put it in his mind to ensure that he puts back the data on performances and the actual result, the targets and the results of the tax offices throughout Greece. Public procurement, finally, is the weakest link among the 3 pillars of financial transparency, despite the fact that open data sets in procurement are included among the significant actions Greece has to undertake under the OGP program. Implementation does lag behind. It's not the legal framework that's a problem. I mean, largely the European framework is the legal framework that we use. But it's really lack of political will and ensuring that people basically work to sidestep and track the rules. So this is one important area to focus, and if the current or the next government focuses on that, I'm sure a lot of fruit is to be had. And I've proposed back in home an integrated system of rules regarding public procurement, uniform rules for all kinds of supplies, from military to hospital, annual programming, and publication of supply needs. I think that's very important. E-procurement, of course, use of IT and open data sets, also in the stages of the public tenders before the final stages, and central registry of all the public contracts to be made available in public. These proposals are not very far from the proposals included in the strategic plan for public procurement by the Hellenic Single Procurement Authority. I'm finishing with this slide, hoping not to be too late. There is a clear link between transparency and growth, and I think Professor Van Schaik showed that there's a link between democracy and transparency as well. Countries that rank high are usually high-income countries, but there is no hard evidence that transparency is the cause rather than the consequence of high income. An important result, however, is that among countries who publish budget documents, higher income country documents are more comprehensive. In Greece, we seem to be among the countries who perform better than average in terms of readiness, 60%, but only 38% in terms of implementation, while our impact score is only 18%. And the economic impact especially is 0%. So we're missing something important here. It's not a question of publishing data, but also do we publish the correct data, and what use do we make of the data that we publish? As to the first question, the answer is not yet. We're not publishing the correct data in most of the cases. Surprisingly enough, in Greece, we do not have a valuation of fixed assets. This is important in the discussion that Paul really has mentioned so many times. We have no clear view of the property's worth. And let me add that effectively this suits both sides of the argument between privatization and non-privatization. If you want to privatize, you don't want to have a clear valuation of the data, because that way you can privatize at any price you might want. I'm talking from the sort of corrupt point of view. And if you don't want to privatize, you want to be able to destroy value without people actually knowing. So this is actually a non-political discourse. This is something that helps a dysfunctional political system either way of either side of the argument. As to the second issue, real transparency means we give access to data that actually have a meaning, materiality. When this happens, we do not have to create complex control mechanisms. Here the problem is of regulatory capture in more advanced economies, but in the case of Greece, the fact that we have ineffective audit and control. So transparency helps us because it acts as a self-imposed compliance. So it's much more effective, especially in countries with the problems that Greece has. So last but not least, an indispensable condition to create a true impact for the economy and the society through transparency and information is that all actions are to be adopted and internalized by leadership. This is the famous question of ownership. We really have to take ownership of the problems. And I'll give you an example. In the program, there's a question of depoliticization of the public administration. In my view, this is one of the biggest issues, both in terms of corruption. Effectively, it's a business plan that the old, for so many decades, parties in Greece have followed, and in many other countries. I don't want to say that Greece is such a different case. Effectively controlling the public sector, and through that ensuring that they stay in power longer and they get re-elected. Now, if we are to make strides and to stop this short-termism that the political system imposes on the public sector so that the projects can be longer length and be completed in a successful manner, we have to emancipate the public sector. And the problem of control is through the heads of the different units. So unless we stop the practice, and this government has followed the same way that the previous did, the practice of appointing the heads of the different units, then there is no way that those heads can actually do, for example, performance assessment. You cannot do performance assessment when you don't have the moral high standpoint of being assessed yourself in the initial position. So that's very important if you are to affect real transformation and real change. And when the Greek political system internalizes that, that's when it's going to have real ownership of the changes, and that's when it will be able to demand, in my view, and I'm closing with this, it will be able to demand to put a stop to this vicious circle that we've been currently seeing. The program, for example, has been delayed, the first assessment, for 6 months, and as a result, we are paying at least 3.6 billion worth of new measures. That's 600 million per month. So the fact, and here we agree with Mr. Koutoudakis, the fact of the matter is that we have to do whatever we can to stop this constant negotiation. So in my view, both last year's and this year's protracted negotiations are being paid dearly by the Greek public. And unless we build this kind of trust, we can never demand that we reverse the implementation of the reforms. We have to do only the structural side, and as a result, we have to demand that there is no more fiscal adjustment. The Greek people cannot withstand any more fiscal adjustment, and when I'm saying this is that effectively, I think at some point the effect of more taxes, etc., will be just the collapse of the Greek economy, and the notion that we will be able to repay any of the debt will be gone, I think, from all the actors. So thank you very much.